the historical context that Africa is facing. Now, the feminist demands for a binding treaty are exactly rooted in that. They're rooted in demands for systemic change. They are rooted in demands for an economic system that does not increase inequalities. So it should not increase inequalities amongst genders, but also it needs to decrease inequalities among states. And at the end of the day, we hope that this instrument is one that actually redistributes power and resources so that everyone can have equal opportunities worldwide. Now, our feminist perspective also draws on analysis of power, which is both historical and structural, and how this plays out today. So I think Kia has done an excellent landscape analysis of why this is important and how the transnational corporations are actually instruments of continued colonialism and pulverizing of wealth and plunder in African context. But I'm going to speak specifically to the gender justice perspective, because now we even appreciate the examples, the numerous examples that have been surfaced, particularly with the COVID crisis, in terms of how transnational corporations continue to amass wealth and continue to grow in sheer size, scope, and influence. One such example is the flower farm workers. And I think these have been most affected, especially when we look at the global supply chains. But I think the issue therein with flower farm workers, when we look at export processing zones, the EPZs, when we look at garment workers, is first of all, how they're exploited by transnational corporations to really pursue profit at whatever cost, in the words of Kia, but also how the system ensures that such industries that are female dominated are always precarious. So they have low wages, they have poor working conditions, and they're the first to be affected by crisis. I think even when we look at the extractive industry, the fact that, there are a lot of women who are doing the actual work that takes, the sheer will and muscle from these young women is work that actually need to be done by machines. And so that gives us a glimpse into how gendered and how corporate abuse is actually a gender issue. I think having said that, we do know when we come back to the continent is that corporate power thrives basically and depends on exploiting power imbalances. Now, this is where the African perspective meets the gender perspective, because we do know that a majority of women and affected communities in the continent, most of them are probably illiterate or low skilled. And so then that makes them quite vulnerable for exploitation, right? And this further intensifies structural inequalities. And so we can talk about a lot of things, from land grabbing to environmental pollution, to the role of women human rights defenders, defending transnational corporations, and often the fact that crisis and conflict often hit, these groups the hardest. But I think what we would like to advance, one is with the binding treaty, is we need an instrument that is actually trying to address corporate impunity in the broadest scope possible. While we know that the instrument might not do that, I think there are very different stakeholders and actors who are interested in slowing down the process. I think it's up to us as African citizens, and particularly African governments, to step up, because we are disproportionately impacted by these issues. One of the things that we also advance is applying an intersectional lens. So we do know that there are many ways that we can see how gender affects human rights. And so how do we ensure that the treaty is looking at women not as a homogeneous group, but in their various intersecting identities? Having said that, we strongly believe that this binding treaty is, first of all, a historical opportunity for African states and governments to be bold and to be courageous, because I think it's under the ambit of a multilateral process. And so African states have the opportunity to stand up and actually advance demands that will secure a future for African citizens, but also not to let powerful transnational corporations to undermine our state sovereignty. And I think at the end of the day, we need to really advance, the obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights of all persons. And so in addition to the process in and of itself, providing that opportunity, I think it's excellent what's happening now in terms of popularizing and democratizing the information and how people understand how corporate impunity manifests itself, but also continues to reinforce colonial ideals and politics. Specifically with the second revised treaty, we have an elaborate document that I'd be happy to circulate with specific recommendations. But we want to say two things, because I think I'm also running out of time. Two things. One, we welcome the progress that has been done so far. Like I mentioned, the Feminist for Binding Treaty has been working since 2016, and I think we've been working and are in solidarity with the other coalitions that are advancing the need for a strong binding instrument. And we have seen quite a bit of progress. And so we welcome the fact that states have repeatedly called, particularly in the fifth session, particularly reaffirmed the importance of a gender dimension in the process, but also in the instrument explicitly. And so we are seeing that there are particular references in the need for a gender perspective. And we want to say that this has been because of consolidated efforts within the coalitions that are working in this process, but also the consistent call and elevating of examples that speak to the need for a gender perspective. I think particularly in the context of the second revised treaty, we welcome the explicit preambular acknowledgement of the distinctive and disproportionate impact of business-related human rights abuses on women and girls, among others. We also welcome the specific references that have spoken to the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights Defenders and the legitimate role of human rights defenders in promoting the respect of human rights by businesses. Having said that, I think we are in a context where I think somebody coined a beautiful word that says the virtualization of multilateralism. And essentially what this means is that there is a key concern that now we are not able to be in Geneva, for example, we are not able to do direct lobbying amongst our member states, because now we are pushed to use tools such as Zoom to engage in this process. And of course, with a process such as the binding treaty, there are very real fears and very real concerns. One, around not having affected communities' voices and perspectives included in the processes, but two, knowing the all-consuming influence of corporations and what they can do around influencing the direction that this process takes, something that is called corporate capture. And so for us, what we recommend is to continue to maintain and build on the progress so far, and where possible, and we have highlighted very specific areas, clarify the context, application, and widen the scope of the instrument. I think other recommendations that we actually advance as a Feminist for Binding Treaty is around how can we make the instrument more gender responsive, but even more so, how can we make it gender transformative? We have advanced a very specific language that we think we can do this. I think in the context of treaty language, I think there's some potency, some power in how we phrase our language. So for example, there's a lot of language around victims, and we hope that that can be changed to reflect survivors or affected groups, because we know how that can be interpreted. I think the other thing is, and perhaps other speakers will talk about this, is there's still negotiations and back and forth around having states being centered as being complicit to advancing corporate impunity. And so we recommend that we introduce the notion of human rights violations in the text as being very essential with regard to having states also accountable in some of the roles that they play in corporate accountability. We have seen in a couple of years that the challenge with the treaty is also putting a laundry list of identity groups. And we propose a way forward in terms of how can we phrase that within international human rights language, because I think the concern around that, and I think it was Arnold who mentioned it yesterday in the workshop, is that often we are pushing for a gender or feminist perspective, but we have seen more of women, and we don't see any language on gender non-conforming persons, on sexual and gender minorities, that we think is quite crucial to center in this language. One, because we have also seen what we call pink washing where corporates actually identify these groups as allies to advance their agendas in ways that are very problematic. And so we still know that when we look at women, they are not a homogeneous group. So how do we ensure that the different identities and the different experiences can be included in how we word some of these documents? I think a lot of what we also advance will be spoken to by the affected communities, because we are quite concerned about that, the role of human rights defenders, the fact that when we talk about conflict, we are not mentioning occupied areas and conflict-prone areas. And we think that particularly in a context such as Africa, where conflict is actually used as a way to amass wealth and plunder resources from the country, we need very strong language that speaks to that, the conflict-prone and conflict-affected. But more specifically, within a gender perspective, we know the sexual and gender-based violence that is always accompanied in those processes. So I hope I've helped elaborate a bit of the feminist perspective, but happy to advance the document that we have around key recommendations, and we'll be here in case of any questions. Thank you, Kia.
Thank you so much, Philogene, for that. So I'm just gonna then give an opportunity for Mishak to come in and sort of share, like you mentioned, the perspective from affected communities.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to Yukia and the other people. It's important that we have this opportunity on this second revised draft, because I'm Mishak Mbangula, National Coordinator of Mining Affected Communities United in Action, which is its aim is to capacitate communities for them to be able to unleash the potential of them to engage from an informed base with these transnational companies or multinational companies that are engaging with us, as well as the government. Firstly, we, the mining affected communities, we are reaffirming the fundamental human rights and the dignity and the worth of the human person, the equal rights of men and women, and the need to promote social progress and better the standard of life in a larger freedom. We believe in respecting environment, while respecting the obligation of the arising from the treaties and other sources of the international law as set out in the Charter of the United Nations. And we believe that is, firstly, we have looked at the 6.1 on the treaty, Article 6.1 A and B, and which is, firstly, before I even start commenting, that is, I'm worried that is the word prevent and mitigate are very much ambiguous, because they don't say when should the prevention to prevent be done, and any fundamental rights violation, and when they should be mitigate them. That's very important. And over and above that, it's important that is I believe that is it's important that is we should making the transnational corporation respond and account to the damage they've caused. When we talk about the issues of globalization here, it was very touching, because we spoke about it in our meeting last week, where we indicated that is how the globalization really did the race to the bottom, where they open up these gates, or to be able to come in as investors, invading our countries, looting minerals, and because they have capital, they were able to manipulate the states, our states in the regional. And it was very important. You must know that is we, the developing countries, engaging with developed countries, we find ourselves begging, following the rules that is they put in of the developed countries. And we are still trapped in the very same rules where we have to cooperate in such rules. At the same time, we as communities in the region as such, because I've been to other countries and I've seen all the mining affected communities, how they suffer in all these rules. I believe that is, as mining affected communities, vis-a-vis these transnational corporations, we have to come up with strategies that will make sure that is even the laws, the binding treaty laws that are there, should be able to be implemented. We always talk about free, prior, and informed consent principles that are there, and I believe that if that itself should be put in the treaty, incorporated in the treaty, will level the playing field. We will be able to start be consulted, meaningful consultation, force the states to monitor this transnational government. Again, if you look at the Article 6.1b, it talks of the companies have to identify and try and prevent and the dangers to the human rights. I believe that is we should be involved in identifying the issues. We should be part in deciding how big are the damages and what should be done in that. Not leaving the very same perpetrator to identify issues, because he might not identify all the issues and be able to get away with the crime. So it's important that is we look at these issues to say communities that will be affected by these things should be able to be part of the identify and access the actual of the potential of the human rights abuse that may arise from their own businesses. But communities should be the one identifying such, because as we look at the issues now, the status quo still remains. The investors, they use the UAE investors to come in, and when they are in, because they have capital, they manipulate the states, and the states have to agree to all these laws that they come up with. And we coming in, we're saying having the binding treaty, but the state are manipulated by the very transnational corporations. Because if you don't want me to do this, I'll move away from the country. And what do we do about such? And because we, on the floor, the ground, we are facing the issues of contaminated water, forceful removal, land grabs, pollution, and inequality, which is the source of poverty. We're seeing poverty is growing when we're having people calling themselves investors coming in and to loot the minerals, whilst our communities are not. The treaty should be an instrument to to address the historical disadvantaged people and improve their lives. That's instrument that we should be able to look at. How can, if you look at the legal part of section 20, 21, and 24, that legal part, how should that be used or implemented to make sure that the states are forced to take action if the TNCs don't comply? It's very important that we look at that. And the identifying of the issues should be part of the communities, not just being told what is happening, what you're going to do as TNC, because they're not going to do that. They are here to loot and leave the whole of Africa with not rehabilitated countries. I mean, we are facing that. We are facing the issues of the government issuing the licenses, mining, mushrooming all over the place. And those are the people coming from foreign countries to loot metal, and they come with their own people to work here. So we are facing an issue that is going to be a serious problem to the mining affected communities. And it will affect especially the issue of women, because women are the most affected when it comes to these issues. Because after everything has been done, they are left with a burden of sick people, contaminated water, no place to, no shelter, and so on. I mean, we have, for instance, in South Africa, our constitution, section 2425, which states very well that is, we've got a right to live in an environment that is not harmful. But the government itself brings in the companies which fails to monitor, and then when they abuse or infringe our rights, and nothing happens. But instead, when you start acting as communities, you are seen as people who are not and don't understand investment, who don't understand development. So in that case, I think it's important that we should be the part of decision making. Free, prior, informed consent principles should be incorporated in this treaty. Should all over, because it will level the playing field and make us sure that we negotiate from equal base. Because now at the moment we are talking to TNC's government, which has got power. I believe when people say let's dismantle the corporate power, because that's the power that affect the government, affect the states, affect communities, get manipulated by the so-called investors. It's time where we look at to change all that and have the free, prior, informed consent incorporated for us to be able to deal with the issues that we face as mining affected community and the larger community. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Mish. I think what you're bringing to the fore and highlighting close to the end of your intervention is how interlinked the issues are. And even though it's important for us to stress the particularities, but dealing with them helps us to deal with the other issues too. So mentioning the challenges and that women face constantly. Thank you so much, Comrade Mish. So I'm going to please remind the panelists to please speak a little bit slowly so the interpreters can get an opportunity to interpret you clearly. And please also remember that you have 10 minutes for each of your interventions. So now I'm going to give an opportunity to Father Joe to please come in. Father Joe. Father Joe, if you're started your intervention, we can't hear you, you're on mute.
Okay, do you hear me?
We can hear you, Father Joe, but we unfortunately cannot see your face at the moment.
Do you see me now?
Not yet, Father Joe, we're looking at your window.
I don't know. I don't know. Okay, at least you can see me, so let's talk and.
There we go. We can see you, Father.
Thank you. So, why you do about the? So I'm going to speak in French, yeah. But,
Father Joe, before you start, Father Joe, we can't hear you clearly. There's a little bit of issues with your sound, so please just make sure to probably speak close into your laptop. And then comrades and participants, Father Joe is going to be intervening in French. So if you would like to hear the translation, please jump into the English channel. If you can speak French fluently and understand, please stay on this channel. So Father Joe, would you like to start speaking so we can just hear your sound quality?
Ok, merci. Mon intervention, c'est sur l'appel des évêques de l'Afrique de l'Ouest pour un traité contraignant. Alors, les évêques ont fait cette déclaration à la suite de leur conseil permanent. Et cette déclaration est basée sur 3 documents importants de l'Église. Le premier document important, c'est Ecclesia in Africa, l'Église en Afrique, où les pères synodaux comparaient l'Afrique à l'homme qui descendait de Jérusalem à Jéricho et qui est tombé dans les mains des bandits, des brigands, qui l'ont dépouillé, qui l'ont roué de coups et se sont en allés en le laissant à demi-mort. Donc, on peut voir ça dans Ecclesia in Africa, les numéros 40-41, bien dans l'évangile de Luc au chapitre 10, versets 25 à 37. Le deuxième document important, c'est Laudato Si. Alors, ici, les évêques ont fait, se sont appropriés le concept de la maison commune que le pape François a lancé dans le document post-synodal Laudato Si. Et ils affirment que les gouvernements des pays développés sont aussi les gardiens de la maison commune. Et donc, ils les invitent à prendre conscience du fait qu'ils tiennent en leurs mains, eh bien, non seulement le sort de leur pays respectif, mais aussi le sort de toute l'humanité. Et les évêques citent le pape François au numéro 5 de Laudato Si qui disait « La destruction de l'environnement humain est très grave. Parce que non seulement Dieu a confié le monde à l'être humain, mais encore la vie de celui-ci est un don qui doit être protégé de diverses formes de dégradation. Toute volonté de protéger et d'améliorer le monde suppose de profonds changements dans les styles de vie, les modèles de production et de consommation, les structures de pouvoir établies qui régissent aussi les sociétés. Le développement humain authentique, donc, a un caractère moral et suppose le plein respect de la personne humaine. Mais il doit aussi prêter attention au monde naturel et tenir compte de la nature de chaque être et de ses liens mutuels avec un système ordonné. Le troisième et dernier document, c'est Querida Amazonia, chère Amazonie, dans lequel les évêques comparent eh bien, la splendeur de l'Afrique, le drame de l'Afrique et le mystère de l'Afrique à ce que vit eh bien, le peuple de l'Amazonie. Et partant donc de ces trois documents, les évêques ont lancé un appel aux décideurs africains comme aux décideurs des pays développés à travers ce thème. Œuvrons ensemble pour le droit des communautés et de l'environnement. Ensemble, œuvrons pour le droit des communautés et l'environnement. Ils disent, ensemble, œuvrons pour un nouvel ordre mondial qui garantit aux différentes communautés de l'Afrique de l'Ouest le droit à un environnement qui promeut un développement durable, un environnement qui respecte la nature et les ressources naturelles. À la suite donc du pape François, les évêques ont invité les gouvernements de l'Afrique de l'Ouest à corriger les modèles de croissance qui se révèlent incapables de garantir le respect de l'environnement et le droit des communautés. Et ça, c'est ce que font les multinationales. Donc, les évêques invitent à une correction. Mais pourquoi cette invitation? Eh bien, l'invitation des évêques repose sur deux constats. D'abord, la question de l'accaparement et de l'expropriation des terres. Le premier constat. Le deuxième constat, c'est l'extraction des minéraux et les conséquences écologiques. Bon, concernant le premier constat, les évêques disent de toute leur force, ils dénoncent l'accaparement et l'expropriation sous toutes ses formes. Parce que les conséquences qui en découlent sont incalculables. Vous avez perte du patrimoine culturel et ancestral, déplacement des populations, chômage, famine, exode, migration. Et donc, aux États et aux entreprises, aux multinationales, à tous ceux qui sont engagés dans cette funeste opération de l'accaparement et de l'expropriation des terres en Afrique, les évêques adressent une invitation basée sur la Bible. De prêter l'oreille à la parole de Dieu. Ne dépouille pas le faible, c'est un faible. Et n'écrase pas l'homme d'humble condition en justice. Proverbe 22, 22. Et ils poursuivent. Nous sommes convaincus que les êtres humains sont établis par le Créateur comme les gardiens de la terre et de notre maison commune. Donc, dans l'esprit de Laudato Si, aux côtés des peuples d'Afrique, nous réaffirmons notre engagement pour la sauvegarde des droits de ces peuples, pour le respect de leurs valeurs, de leurs traditions, de leurs coutumes et de leur culture. Nous voulons œuvrer pour la préservation de la terre, des forêts, des rivières et tout ce qui vit et s'épanouit dans ces espaces considérés en Afrique, non pas comme des ressources à exploiter dans le sens unique du profit, mais plutôt comme des espaces sacrés, sources de vie, de sagesse et d'équilibre. Malheureusement, aujourd'hui, les peuples africains sont confrontés au phénomène de l'accaparement des terres par des multinationales avec la complicité des acteurs locaux. Ça, les évêques ont insisté dessus. Le deuxième point, c'est l'extraction des minerais et les conséquences écologiques. Malgré ce qu'on peut dire des bénéfices économiques de l'extraction des minerais en Afrique, les évêques insistent à noter que les effets néfastes sont incalculables. Ils sont incalculables pour les peuples africains. Et dans ces effets néfastes-là, il y a la dégradation de l'environnement, déséquilibre de l'écosystème, perte de la biodiversité, pollution des rivières, des mers, des nappes phréatiques. Et donc, là encore, ils s'approprient l'enseignement du pape François. Ils disent des rivières, de diverses manières, les peuples en développement où se trouvent les plus importantes réserves de la biosphère continuent d'alimenter le développement des pays les plus riches au prix de leur présent et de leur futur. Alors, devant ces constats-là, que faut-il faire? Les évêques tirent la conclusion qu'il y a nécessité d'un instrument contraignant en Afrique et pour l'Afrique. Alors, ils disent ici, je cite, « Nous reconnaissons qu'il existe plusieurs traités et conventions internationaux, mais ces conventions ne rendent pas justice à l'Afrique. Ainsi, les évêques appellent-ils à l'établissement d'un instrument mondial juridiquement contraignant pour réglementer les activités des sociétés transnationales. » Et ils disent, et je cite ici, « Nous demandons à nos gouvernements respectifs en Afrique de l'Ouest d'œuvrer collectivement avec les autres pays pour la réalisation d'un tel instrument en vue d'une gouvernance mondiale apaisée, facteur de cohésion sociale. » De plus, nous exhortons les hommes politiques et les autorités coutumières de nos pays à défendre les droits de leur peuple et de participer au projet de ces traités et de consentir à leur mise en œuvre. De cette manière, le consentement libre, informé et préalable sera garanti pour le peuple. Voici ce que disent les évêques. Et comme ils ne veulent pas s'exclure, dit que c'est les autres qui doivent faire, les évêques poursuivent en disant, pour notre part, nous instruisons les commissions nationales et diocésaines de justice et paix, les caritas, à redoubler d'efforts et d'innovation dans l'assistance, la protection et la prise en charge des victimes des effets néfastes de l'accaparement des terres, de l'expropriation des terres. Et ils ne s'arrêtent pas là parce que les commissions justice et paix, les caritas, ce sont les instruments de l'Église pour faire advenir la justice dans leur milieu. Mais les évêques, eux aussi, s'engagent en disant, pour notre part, quant à nous, nous nous engageons à faire un travail intense de plaidoyer auprès de toutes les instances nationales, régionales et internationales, afin que des cadres et mécanismes forts puissent être mises en place pour corriger toute injustice et toute anomalie. Alors, pour coller la parole aux actes, certaines conférences ont déjà engagé leurs gouvernements respectifs. Je vais penser par exemple à la conférence du Ghana, en union avec leur commission justice et paix et leur Caritas nationale. Il en est de même de la conférence du Burkina Faso, même chose. Et nous, au niveau du secrétariat, nous avons transmis la lettre avec une lettre, la déclaration des évêques, avec une lettre de transmission à la commission de la CEDEAO pour que, au niveau de la CEDEAO, ils engagent les États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest à cet instrument contraignant. Les évêques, ils n'ont que leur prière, mais aussi la parole prophétique pour engager, et il ne peut pas s'impliquer. Donc, voici un peu ce que les évêques pensent. Mais en travaillant avec les commissions justice et paix, par exemple au Togo, au Bénin, au Burkina, et au Sénégal, et en Côte d'Ivoire, ces commissions justice et paix aussi ont insisté sur le consentement libre, informé et préalable pour que avant que les multinationales ne s'installent. Ils insistent aussi sur le fait que les communautés affectées par les guerres doivent être prises au sérieux et engagées. Toutes ces multinationales qui sont derrière ces guerres qui sont montées là doivent directement être mises sur le banc des accusés. Et donc, ça veut dire que pour ces Caritas-là, il faut une obligation directe de ces multinationales-là dans le développement même de la communauté. Alors, j'ai appris un exemple, par exemple, qu'en RDC, avant qu'une multinationale ne s'installe, il y a un référendum dans la région pour que tout le monde donne son accord ou son refus, mais après un travail préalable de formation, tout ça. J'ose espérer qu'un jour, nous puissions le faire ici aussi en Afrique de l'Ouest. Alors, voilà un peu ce que je peux dire de ce qui se fait un peu dans notre région quant à ce traité contraignant que l'Afrique de l'Ouest, les évêques appellent de tous leurs vœux. Merci.
Thank you so much, Father Joe. Merci. I really appreciate your intervention. Comments we will share on the chat an outline of where each speaker is speaking from, so we can be able to contextualize the issues. But that being said, then I'm going to please hand over to Commit Faith to please join us and talk about the labor/trade union perspective in relation to the treaty. Commit Faith, if you are intervening, we can't hear you. Commit Faith, can you please come in and share the trade union and labor perspectives? So I assume we might be facing some technical difficulties. So that being said, then,
Hello.
hi Faith, great.
Hello.
You can please come in.
Yes, sorry about that. My assumption was that I would speak about the trade union issues when I'm speaking about the trade and investment perspective.
Yes, for
Yeah?
sure. Please feel
Would
free
that
to
be okay?
intervene. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, so you would want me to proceed, yeah?
Yes, please, Faith.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, my sound may be funny because I am in transit, but that's I hope that you're hearing me just fine. So from the trade and investment perspective, for us, the binding treaty is a very important document because for a long time, one of the challenges that we have had has been convincing governments to include issues around human rights and an environment within trade and investment agreements, but also trade and investment legal frameworks. Because right from the beginning, the intention of trade and investment agreements was to protect the rights and interests of investors. So following after the Second World War, one of the things that the US proposed was the need for governments to develop what we call the they were called friendship commerce cooperation agreements, and the intention was basically to guarantee investors protection of their rights. And so until today, bilateral investment treaties, but also agreements, for example, within the World Trade Organization, bilateral trade agreements, like, for example, some of you may be familiar with the economic partnership agreements. At the moment, as Africa, we are negotiating the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And it's the intention is basically to provide an environment that can attract trade, can attract investors, but also be able to guarantee protection of their rights, protection of their interests, protection of their properties. And when I say interests, also taking into account issues to do with profits, that when an investor comes there, they are guaranteed profits. And this is why, for example, a lot of investors raise concerns when it comes to governments putting in place laws that require them to pay out only a wage not below the minimum. So in that case, putting in place minimum wages, or even requiring that they provide protective gears and all those other benefits. And these we refer to as the performance requirement measures. So because the entire system has basically been skewed towards protecting rights, the rights of corporations, the rights of citizens and communities have been undermined. And I'm going to give certain examples of provisions. So, for example, when it comes to the definition of what constitutes an investment, the definition has been made very broad to even undermine, for example, certain aspects that that as citizens that as citizens have been provided for in certain frameworks. So, for example, within the World Trade Organization, there's what we call the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights Agreement, which provides flexibilities, and the intention is basically to protect, to allow for poor states, the least developed countries, to be able to legally infringe on intellectual property for example, of medicines, to be able to produce cheaper drugs for communities, for countries that cannot be able to afford the first line drugs. But through the different agreements that our governments are signing, we have increasingly lost out on some of these flexibilities, on some of this policy space, and so the treaty in this case, for us, we feel is going to help for us to be able to regain some of these policy space that we have lost. Another issue I wanted to raise is to do with what we call expropriation, and this particular provision is often included in investment agreements in such a way that it is prohibiting expropriation without compensation, that a country, that a government it does not have the right to put in place a legal framework, say, to protect the environment against pollution, or to protect people's labor rights, to protect workers against low wages. Because if it does so, and the investor and the corporation can indicate that their right to maximize profits has been undermined, then they can sue the government for compensation. So the idea is basically to ensure that this particular entity the corporations are protected from regulatory actions that could be undertaken or that could be put in place by a government, and then somehow affect their operation or affect their ability to maximize profits. And that's why today in Uganda, one of the things that we have a campaign that's going on, we are saying we need to consider life before profits. And the Treaty on Business and Human Rights is basically helping to emphasize that there should be life before profits, that in whatever we do, life needs to be put first before profits. So one of the things that I wanted to emphasize that is that when we look at today, the second draft as it looks like is I think that's under Article 14.5. It's specifically indicating that the UN Treaty on Business and Human Rights will supersede all other trade or regional and international trade and investment agreements. And this is a very positive provision. However, one of the challenges that we are seeing is that increasingly today, like for example, with the increasing number of Chinese investments, a lot of them are not relying on trade, on regional and international trade and investment agreements that our countries are part of, but they're using contracts that they sign directly with our governments, and then are able to execute different investments. And so one of the proposals that we have is that it's important for us to look beyond just trade, regional and international trade and investment agreements, and also consider the contracts, because also these contracts are being concluded without stakeholder consultation, and they do not include some of these different issues. And so the scope the scope of agreements should take into account all this, because also when it comes to the labor rights violations that are happening, this is where a lot of the violations are happening. We are seeing Chinese investors coming and paying very low wages because they are not being held accountable by the state. But also, and one of the things that was raised yesterday was that there is need to increase the obligation on the investors, because a lot of the obligations have been put on the states, and yet even when you look at the way trade and investment agreements are designed, they are designed in such a way that they are not putting responsibility and obligation on the investors. So for the UN treaty to be as effective as possible, even within the context of trade and investment agreements, it's important that we strengthen the obligation and responsibilities of corporations. And I think I will close at that moment. Maybe I could add if there are any questions that arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Faith. And thank you so much for connecting, even though there are difficulties in relation to connection. So I was just hoping then we're going to move on to the next speaker. Comrades, please also remember that we will give an opportunity for us to intervene and to share our comments and thoughts in relation to the treaty, the draft treaty itself, and also just comments and thoughts in relation to the conversation that we're having right now. Just a note again for the panelists, please take note to speak a little bit slowly and clearly into your microphones so that the translators can hear you. I'm now going to give an opportunity to Comrade Moye to come through and share with us. Just for your indulgence, Comrade Moye is from Cameroon and will be sharing youth perspectives in relation to the treaty.
Et bon après-midi à tous. Je veux me rassurer d'être entendu dans un premier temps.
Comrade Moye, will you be intervening in French?
Yes.
Okay, so just give us a moment to switch channels. Comrades, please switch to the English channel if you'd like to hear the translated version of Comrade Moye's intervention. Comrade Moye, please take the floor.
OK. Donc, voilà, je suis Moïse Mbimbe. Donc, une petite précision d'abord pour commencer. Donc, Moïse Mbimbe du Cameroun, du mouvement Young Friends of the Treaty. Donc, un mouvement qui a été créé à l'effet de permettre que la voix des jeunes soit également entendue dans ce processus de traité important, non seulement pour la communauté humaine dans son ensemble, mais aussi et surtout pour une jeunesse qui représente la majorité de la population de l'Afrique. On parle de plus de 1,3 milliard donc, de personnes à travers le continent. Engager les jeunes est donc une question de justice intergénérationnelle de notre point de vue. Donc, nous avons, depuis l'année dernière, coutume d'organiser des consultations sur les drafts successifs du traité. Et cette année, nous avons donc eu une consultation qui a impliqué un certain nombre de jeunes Camerounais et à travers laquelle nous avons mené un certain nombre de réflexions que je vais partager donc rapidement avec vous. Notre analyse était une analyse article par article du traité. Cependant, il a fallu, compte tenu d'un certain nombre de contraintes de temps notamment, calibrer et s'en tenir à un certain nombre d'articles clés. Mais sur le préambule, par exemple, nous avons noté l'intérêt de préciser que le processus du traité s'inscrit également dans un contexte d'échec de la responsabilité sociale des entreprises qui, par sa nature volontaire, n'a donc pas été suffisante pour permettre aux entreprises de respecter leurs obligations et surtout de respecter les droits de l'homme. Nous pensons qu'il serait également pertinent, toujours dans ce préambule, d'évoquer et de rappeler le principe de la déclaration de Rio sur les responsabilités communes mais différenciées. Enfin, là également, dans le préambule, nous pensons que dans la l'ensemble des catégories vulnérables qui ont été énumérées, qu'il serait bon que les jeunes, en tant que victimes d'aujourd'hui et de demain, soient énumérés, mis en lumière comme une des catégories vulnérables pour lesquelles il est impérieux d'avoir un traité. Après la lecture de l'article 1er, qui définit, notamment dans la définition de la violation des droits de l'homme, nous avons noté que la définition s'appliquait à toute forme d'entreprise au lieu de se limiter aux sociétés à caractère transnational. Donc, le souhait émis par les jeunes à la lecture de cet article était donc que la définition qui est faite est partout dans le texte où il est fait mention d'entreprise au sens large, que cela soit circonscrit, comme ça a été le cas dans le draft 0, aux entreprises à caractère transnational. Donc, le même problème se pose au niveau de l'objet du traité à l'article 2. Et également au niveau de l'article 3 sur le champ d'application du traité. Donc, les jeunes ont émis le point de vue qu'il fallait que ce soit circonscrit. Au niveau de l'article 4.2F, nous avons pensé qu'il serait bon de subdiviser le point F de l'article 2. Le point F parle de la garantie de l'accès à l'information et à l'aide juridique nécessaire. Nous avons pensé qu'il fallait le subdiviser pour distinguer d'une part, la question de l'accès à l'information, la traiter différemment, et d'autre part, la question de l'assistance juridique. Traiter la question de l'information, l'accès à l'information différemment pour pouvoir mettre en lumière le point sur la nécessité de divulgation par les différents acteurs, en particulier les entreprises, des informations sur les traités et autres instruments de protection des droits des communautés lors des consultations et audiences publiques en marge de la réalisation des études d'impact environnemental et social ou des audits d'impact environnemental et social en fonction du contexte. Au niveau de l'article 5, nous avons pensé que les obligations qui ont été énumérées et qui ont été et qui visaient les États principalement doivent également être imposées aux entreprises. Donc, il s'agit d'obligations de protection des victimes, de leurs représentants, des familles et témoins contre les atteintes illicites aux droits de l'homme et libertés, et d'obligation de mettre en place des mesures adéquates pour garantir un environnement sûr et favorable aux personnes et autres groupes. Donc, nous pensons que l'État et les entreprises peuvent partager cette obligation. Et nous pensons que l'article 6 devrait s'appliquer aux entreprises à caractère transnational ainsi qu'à l'ensemble de leur chaîne de valeur. En fait, l'idée de cette proposition est que l'on ne devrait pas circonscrire les responsabilités au niveau des seules filiales que l'on retrouve souvent sur le continent, mais que l'ensemble de la chaîne de valeur puisse être sujette ou assujettie aux obligations qui sont imposées aux entreprises. Alors, au niveau de l'article 6.3 qui exige qu'il soit réalisé régulièrement des études d'impact sur l'environnement et les droits de l'homme tout au long des opérations, nous pensons qu'il serait judicieux de préciser que ce suivi doit se faire avant, pendant et après les opérations. Parce que l'expression tout au long des opérations peut laisser penser qu'à la suite de l'acte matériel qui caractérise l'opération, qu'il n'y ait plus de responsabilité de la part de l'entreprise. Pourtant, on sait bien, et certains copanélistes l'ont relevé, que très souvent des problèmes se posent en termes de réhabilitation des espaces après exploitation d'un certain nombre de ressources par les entreprises. Et nous pensons que le texte devrait également prévoir la divulgation de données financières au-delà des données non financières des entreprises. Et puis, nous avons noté enfin, dans l'analyse article par article, que le projet ne prévoit aucun instrument ou aucun mécanisme d'accès à la justice propre au texte ou propre à la situation qui est régie par le texte. Pourtant, ce n'est pas suffisant de consacrer, d'adopter des règles. Maintenant, il faut les adosser sur un mécanisme de sanction, si bien que s'il n'est pas si les consignes, les règles ne sont pas respectées, et bien que l'on puisse recourir à un mécanisme de sanction et que les communautés donc puissent avoir un meilleur accès à la justice. Nous avons regroupé nos observations en un certain nombre de recommandations que je m'en vais donc partager. La première de ces recommandations était de rappeler dans le préambule l'échec de la responsabilité sociale des entreprises à favoriser l'affirmation des droits de l'homme en entreprise. Nous avons également formulé comme recommandation de rappeler, et certains compagnons l'ont dit avant, rappeler la primauté des droits de l'homme, y compris sur les accords d'investissement, et qu'à ce titre, ces derniers doivent être conformes aux dispositions de l'instrument juridiquement contraignant en cours d'élaboration. Donc, les accords d'investissement doivent pouvoir s'arrimer au texte qui est en cours de négociation et plus largement s'arrimer sur les instruments de protection des droits de l'homme qui existent. La troisième recommandation était de reconnaître donc aux jeunes et aux populations rurales le statut de catégorie particulièrement vulnérable aux violations des droits de l'homme par les multinationales. L'autre recommandation était de ramener la portée de l'instrument aux seules entreprises à caractère transnational, de décliner les formes de violations qui peuvent être subies par les individus ou des communautés du fait des activités des sociétés transnationales. C'est vrai que cette recommandation a dû être révisée parce qu'il y a eu une évolution dans le texte qui nous a permis de relativiser cette recommandation-ci. Veiller à ce que le texte impose certes des obligations directes aux États, mais surtout aux entreprises à caractère transnational. Parce qu'il nous semble-t-il, une fixation trop importante est faite aux États, mais si le texte se contente de cela, il n'aura pas finalement fait œuvre nouvelle, parce qu'il existe déjà un certain nombre d'instruments qui engagent la responsabilité des États en matière de droits de l'homme. L'originalité de ce texte ne viendra que de l'adoption de solides obligations à l'endroit des multinationales. Et puis, une autre recommandation est de veiller à ce que des obligations de transparence soient imposées aux États et aux entreprises dans un contexte où l'accès à la justice n'est envisageable que si l'accès à l'information est garanti. Et enfin, nous avons proposé qu'il soit déterminé des sanctions encourues par les multinationales en cas de violation des droits humains. Une dernière recommandation que j'allais oublier, c'est d'envisager la création de mécanismes de plainte, en particulier une juridiction chargée de connaître des litiges consécutifs aux violations des droits de l'homme commises par les firmes multinationales. Nous sommes également au-delà de ces recommandations, je suis presque hors temps. Au-delà de ces recommandations, nous sommes, je vais prendre 1-2 minutes de plus, nous sommes donc proposés de formuler un certain nombre de principes généraux qui pourront servir de conducteurs au traité et qui pourront faire partie intégrante du traité. Le premier principe est le principe de la primauté, de l'universalité et de l'interdépendance des droits de l'homme. Le deuxième est le principe des responsabilités différenciées des États, parties et des entreprises. Le troisième est le principe de la responsabilité solidaire des entreprises mères et leurs filiales. Le quatrième, le principe de la responsabilité des propriétaires réels. Le cinquième, le principe de l'utilisation inclusive et équitable des ressources naturelles. Le suivant, le principe pollueur-payeur, qui devrait s'appliquer à toutes les formes de pollution, air, eau, sol et j'en passe, et le principe utilisateur-payeur, en vertu duquel l'utilisateur ou exploitant de la ressource doit compenser l'ensemble des acteurs impactés. Nous nous sommes également essayé de ressortir un certain nombre d'obligations qui pourraient peser soit sur les États, soit sur les entreprises à caractère transnational. Je vais passer les obligations des États, compte tenu du temps, pour évoquer 2 ou 3 obligations que nous avons retenues pour le compte des entreprises. L'une d'elles est l'obligation de divulgation des informations financières et non financières des sociétés à caractère transnational dont les activités impactent les États parties. La deuxième est l'obligation d'impliquer pleinement l'ensemble des parties prenantes avant, pendant et après l'installation des sociétés à caractère transnational, en particulier les jeunes, les femmes et les communautés locales et autochtones. Et la troisième, l'obligation de recourir à des technologies éco-responsables. Donc, j'avais demandé 2 minutes de plus, je les ai épuisées, je m'arrêterai là. Peut-être qu'à l'occasion des échanges, je pourrais revenir sur les points que j'ai dû passer. Je vous remercie.
Could you please wrap up? Sorry. Thank you so much, Comrade Moise, and thank you again for correcting me in terms of the pronunciation of your name. I was in the twilight zone earlier, hoping that I don't make a mistake in relation to pronouncing Comrade's names, but I mean, I did. So thanks for that correction. Thank you so much for sharing that thorough perspective and making sure again and reiterating that the voices of young people are put at the forefront. Thank you so much, Comrade Moise. Just now going to let and give an opportunity to Erica and Ben to share some of the key demands that came out of the workshop. I'm seeing on the chat that Comrades continue. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can, Kia.
So just to give an opportunity then to Erica and Ben to share the key demands and perspectives and inputs that came out of the workshop that was held yesterday. So Comrade Erica, please feel free to come through.
Thank you very much. I think Benjamin is going first, then I will go after him.
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Much. Yes, okay. I'm sorry, I won't switch off my video. My internet connection is a bit unstable. Thank you very much, Kia, and I would like to thank particularly the Moise from Cameroon. I think after listening to him and after our discussions yesterday and listening to him today, I think he went through in a very detailed way. He went through all almost all the articles of the draft treaty, and that was exactly what we were asked to do at this stage. And because most of the things that he said are actually what we discussed yesterday and what we were planning, you know, to present today, I think it makes us our task much more easier. And I would just like to maybe highlight a few things here and there, and then maybe Erika would come in and complement. So I think in terms of our demand, in terms of the wording and textual suggestions, almost all have been said, and I know that many of our organizations are going to submit written and also oral to make oral statements during the negotiation. So very quickly, I think one of the most important, one of the key issues here that have been highlighted in this discussion, but also in yesterday's discussion, is the scope of the treaty. But before that, maybe in general, and some people I've pointed it out today. The language of the treaty is still, addressing or is too much directed to state. So we want the treaty to be speaking more to transnational corporations. And in that regard, I think there is a concern about the fact that the treaty as a whole has maintained this kind of linguistic phobia and not wanting to clearly impose obligations on companies, transnational companies. So in terms of the scope of the treaty, the issue has been pointed out. We think that from the beginning of this process, from the resolution that was adopted by the Human Rights Council in 2014, and that many African states supported and voted for, the idea was that this process should be directed to transnational corporations, because other businesses have already obligations under their respective domestic legislations. So this is I won't develop too much. It has been already said. It's a very important point. It should be taken into consideration. So other important things are missing at this stage in the draft. Not only the draft is more or less more speaking to state, but also some other issues like illicit financial flows, corruption, tax evasion. How do we put all these agendas together with in the treaty? This is also missing. We also see that the issue of obligations throughout the supply chain is also not addressed in a strong way in the treaty, as in the draft treaty as it stands now. So for improvement, specific things for improvement, so I've mentioned the issue around the scope. I think that can be, that can be the scope of the article, and the scope is Article 3. That can be modified in the way, amended in a way that it's clearly mentioned that this treaty is about transnational corporations. And Article 2 is about is related to the statement of purpose. And then also this article, we think that in connection or in line with what we said regarding the necessity to impose obligations on transnational corporations, it must be important to, to improve the formulation of Article 2 in order to reflect that necessity. We have some textual proposition, but I don't think it will be, I have enough time to go deeply into these proposition, but it can be done clearly in this article. So we have also the articles on the protection of victims, how we can make them more, gender oriented. I think Philogène mentioned some of these issues before. We have the article on prevention, a very important one. Here, there is a clear need and also a room to state very clearly the direct obligations of companies. That article is really a good place to speak directly about human rights obligations of multinational companies. And then we have in the same article the issue around FPIC. We spoke about this yesterday, and we think that it's important to maintain that Africa has a more, advanced and a higher standard when it comes to FPIC, and that should be reflected in the treaty, at least with a provision that could read, for example, in a way that nothing in this provision shall be construed to derogate from any higher level of recognition of recognition and protection of any human right of victims. So this is something that's clearly possible. Access to information has also been pointed out today. It's very important that this includes information at the earliest stages of the project. So it's not just access to information in order to access remedy. That's very important, and that has been taken into account, fortunately, in this draft. But also it includes the need to access information as per the impact assessment process. So this is a very important point, and Article 6.3d could be amended in that regard. So we have also the issue around enhanced human rights due diligence. We think that Article 6.3g could be clearer, especially mentioning that and precising this notion, but also mentioning the need of the highest due diligence standard when it comes to companies operating in conflict-affected zones. And this should also include the possibility for the company to stop or to disengage in its operation in this kind of situations. So yes, another important point, the liability issues. We think it will be very important if the relationship between the parent company and the subsidiaries can be defined in a more strongest way, especially defining the notion of control and supervision, because as it stands now, it looks like they are synonyms. It's important to know exactly what will be the level of control that is expected in order to trigger the liability of the parent company for the conduct of one of its subsidiaries. So I think, yes, this is also a very important point. Institutional arrangement, Article 15. We think that there is a need definitely for international judicial enforcement mechanism, and that Article 15 can be amended in that regard. Also, Article 14, consistency with international law, principle, and instruments. I think some of the people today, the panelists have already mentioned it. It's important that the primacy of the treaty and all human rights, international human rights over trade and investment agreements is clearly acknowledged, as it stands actually in Article 14, paragraph 5. It's rather a principle of interpretation in line with the treaty that has been provided for, not clearly the primacy of the treaty over these kind of agreements. That's also an area that could be improved. So I think I will stop here. These are more or less things that have been already said. I will maybe just quickly hand over to Erika so that she can also give a general overview on our discussions yesterday. Thank you very much.
Obrigada, Benjamin. Eu vou falar em português. So I will speak in Portuguese. So if anyone needs to switch to English or French channels, please do so. Boa tarde a todos, a todas. Obrigada por se juntarem a nós e obrigada aos nossos painelistas que falaram antes de mim. Acho que já apresentaram muitos dos pontos importantes que temos vindo a debater ao longo dos últimos anos e que também debatemos na nossa reunião da sociedade civil ontem. Acho que, reforçando aquilo que já foi dito por alguns antes de mim, acho que é muito importante contextualizarmos este processo no meio das diferentes crises que vivemos atualmente a nível do planeta e muitas delas com impactos mais acentuados ainda no nosso continente. Falo da crise climática, da crise da desigualdade, da crise da fome, da crise e até mesmo da crise do Covid. É importante relacionarmos estas crises também com os vastos e poderes sem precedentes que estas corporações transnacionais conseguiram acumular ao longo das últimas décadas. E quando percebemos que estas corporações transnacionais são hoje em dia sujeitos de direitos a nível internacional, quando falamos, por exemplo, dos acordos de comércio e investimentos, quando falamos dos tratados bilaterais de investimentos, como foi falado também pela... parece que estamos com algum... acho que eu tenho que ir para o canal em português. Desculpem, acho que... Não sei se agora já me conseguem ouvir. Delfina, não sei se já consegue ouvir. Peço que assinalem no chat se tiverem algum problema, mas acredito que já esteja resolvido. Ok. E quando falamos destes poderes, isto significa que atualmente existem milhares de acordos e tratados bilaterais de investimento que garantem os direitos dos investidores, incluindo o direito de processar Estados soberanos por decisões políticas que alterem os seus planos de negócios e os seus lucros esperados. Então, quando falamos de um tratado internacional a nível das Nações Unidas, é fundamental que fique bastante claro que o objetivo deste tratado é justamente preencher o vazio legal que há a nível do direito internacional e da legislação internacional de direitos humanos, que não reconhece as corporações transnacionais como sujeitos de direito internacional a nível dos direitos humanos. Portanto, este tratado, como foi falado também por alguns colegas antes de mim, não deve ser apenas um instrumento para reforçar mais uma vez obrigações para os Estados de proteger e promover os direitos humanos. Na verdade, estas obrigações dos Estados já estão mais do que consagradas em diversos instrumentos internacionais de direitos humanos. Portanto, o que se pretende e aquilo pelo que devemos exigir a nível deste tratado é justamente que se estabeleçam obrigações legais diretas para estas corporações transnacionais. E isto é o primeiro ponto que eu gostaria de reforçar, justamente para que este tratado consiga dar um passo à frente na questão de responsabilização e penalização de corporações transnacionais que violem direitos humanos, independentemente de onde sejam as suas atividades. Infelizmente não é isso que acontece e hoje em dia estas corporações acabam por muitas vezes escolher os lugares onde vão ter as suas atividades em função de quão fracas são as legislações nos diferentes países ou das dificuldades de implementação que existem a nível dos países. E como sabemos, a nível da África existem muitas dificuldades de implementação, as nossas democracias ainda são frágeis, ainda são recentes e os nossos Estados muitas vezes são incapazes ou mesmo cúmplices de muitas das atividades das corporações transnacionais. Então é preciso que este tratado evolua no sentido de dar uma resposta a estas situações. O segundo ponto que eu gostaria de levantar é algo que foi tocado também por alguns colegas, que é a questão das cadeias globais de valor. O que vemos muitas vezes é que as corporações transnacionais, apesar de estarem articuladas em complexas cadeias globais de valor, tendo muitas vezes uma companhia matriz sediada em algum país, muitas vezes inclusive em paraísos fiscais, no Panamá ou aqui ao lado nas Maurícias. Estas corporações criam as suas subsidiárias a nível dos diferentes países. Portanto, a Vale, por exemplo, é uma companhia brasileira, no entanto, aqui em Moçambique está registada como uma companhia moçambicana, que é a Vale Moçambique. Então, isto é uma forma também destas corporações transnacionais fugirem das suas responsabilidades e, caso haja algum dano ao meio ambiente ou alguma violação de direitos humanos e caso os Estados e as pessoas afetadas consigam efetivamente levar essa corporação à justiça, o máximo que se consegue chegar, e mesmo assim muitas vezes é difícil, é a responsabilização dessa subsidiária, dessa empresa registada a nível doméstico. Portanto, os tomadores de decisão, os acionistas, todos os restantes atores acima na cadeia global de valores permanecem impunes, o que obviamente perpetua esta situação de impunidade, porque muitas vezes as reparações aos danos e as compensações dadas valem muito mais a pena do que efetivamente prevenirem e garantirem que estas violações não acontecem. Então, a questão da responsabilidade solidária em toda a cadeia global de valores é uma questão bastante importante e que, sendo um tratado internacional, é importante que esta questão seja bastante bem abordada ao longo deste tratado. Temos alguns elementos importantes no tratado, mas é preciso enfatizar para que não haja outra interpretação possível em relação à responsabilidade das diferentes empresas. O ponto sobre o âmbito do tratado acho que já foi bastante reforçado aqui. O tratado não é para empresas domésticas, não deveria ser, no entanto isto é algo que foi perdido nos últimos 2 drafts e que, apesar de vários países africanos terem reforçado que o mandato desta resolução seria regular corporações transnacionais e outras empresas que tenham atividade transnacional, infelizmente continuamos com um âmbito bastante aberto que inclui todas as empresas, o que torna o tratado bastante inefetivo. Temos também uma questão, e isto está relacionado também à questão que se falava do acesso à informação, e como falava muito bem o meu colega Benjamin, é importante que isto esteja muito bem salvaguardado, e falamos de vários níveis de acesso à informação. Portanto, não é apenas acesso à informação com o intuito da reparação de danos, mas temos, a nível da África, temos um fenómeno bastante problemático, que é a questão dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos que saem do continente de diversas formas, e está bastante bem documentado por vários estudos, e isto está a impedir que os nossos Estados, que os nossos governos garantam uma base fiscal que permita oferecer serviços públicos à maioria da sua população. Então é muito importante que esta questão do acesso à informação, falando do contexto que temos no continente, garanta também que, e isto é algo que poderia estar, por exemplo, no artigo... Desculpem, perdi aqui o artigo. Exatamente, no artigo 13 do tratado, que é a questão da cooperação internacional. Então é importante que haja formas de levantar aquilo que se chama que é o véu corporativo, que muitas vezes é através desse véu corporativo que as diferentes empresas dentro da mesma cadeia global de valor, ou mesmo que os acionistas e os próprios bancos que financiam estas corporações e que, portanto, são cúmplices com as violações, escondem-se atrás deste véu corporativo e as pessoas afetadas, os Estados que pretendem regular estas corporações, não têm acesso a informações cruciais sobre a estrutura financeira destas corporações. Então é muito importante também para nós, a nível da África, que este instrumento garanta o acesso de informação em questões também da estrutura financeira. Outra falha que vemos ainda neste tratado e na atual versão do tratado é a fraqueza dos mecanismos de implementação. Portanto, atualmente a versão do tratado estabelece apenas um comitê dos Estados que não tem o mandato para investigar e nem mesmo para emitir recomendações vinculativas. Então isto parece-nos ser uma falha muito grande. Temos estado ao longo dos anos a pedir e a exigir que se inclua um mecanismo judicial de implementação, portanto que se estabeleça, por exemplo, uma corte internacional que possa, portanto, levar corporações transnacionais a processar corporações transnacionais que violem direitos humanos, mesmo quando os Estados onde elas se hospedam ou onde elas têm as suas atividades não sejam capazes ou não estejam dispostos a fazê-lo. Portanto, se pretendemos realmente que este tratado reverta esta situação de impunidade, é fundamental que tenha dentes, que tenha formas de implementar as suas provisões de forma vinculativa. Acho que isso fala diretamente ao mandato do tratado. Bom, por fim, eu queria só reforçar que isto é um processo bastante importante, principalmente quando temos em conta as inúmeras deficiências a nível da jurisdição e a nível das formas de acesso à justiça nos diferentes países. E muitas vezes vemos que os processos a nível internacional, dos instrumentos, tanto de direitos humanos como outros instrumentos a nível internacional, são muitas vezes dominados por organizações ou estados do norte global, e achamos que é muito importante que estejamos aqui em diálogo hoje e que se criem formas de dialogarmos entre a sociedade civil com os nossos representantes do Estado, para garantir que as nossas perspectivas a nível da África e os inúmeros casos que temos de crimes corporativos, de violações de direitos humanos, de destruição do meio ambiente, sirvam de base e de experiência para garantirmos um tratado efetivo. Então, esta discussão acontece também no momento em que estamos-nos a preparar para a sessão de negociações, então é fundamental que os governos e que os Estados africanos estejam em diálogo com a sua sociedade civil, com as pessoas afetadas por estas corporações, que é para garantir que temos um instrumento forte. Era isso que eu queria complementar. Eu vou terminar por aqui e estamos abertos também a perguntas e comentários e podemos aprofundar quaisquer destas questões. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Erica, and thank you very much, Benjamin, for that intervention and sort of working us towards a summation of many of the points and perspectives shared today and, of course, yesterday. I think, again, all that has been shared today is extremely important and re-emphasizes the relevancy of us meeting, talking, and making sure that our voices and perspective live and breathe within the treaty itself. So now I'm going to give an opportunity to the floor, and we're going to start first with any state representatives that would like to intervene first, please feel free at the moment to raise your hands, and then I will give you an opportunity to share your thoughts and ideas. Please also just let us know which language you'll be intervening in, so that the participants and other communities can get an opportunity to swap into the respective language. I see at the moment State Representative Jamie would like to come in. So we're gonna give you an opportunity to. Please feel free to intervene.
Good afternoon, Key and dear participants. I don't know whether you are hearing me.
Yes, we can hear you clearly, sir.
So I will be speaking in Portuguese. And, of course, gostaríamos de começar por agradecer à Justiça Ambiental e organizações parceiras por terem organizado e convidado a nossa missão permanente aqui em Geneve para participar nesta importante consulta regional africana sobre o projeto do Tratado Vinculativo das Nações Unidas sobre as companhias multinacionais e direitos humanos. Os participantes lembrar-se-ão de que temos dado importância ao processo das negociações do projeto em apreço, engajamento informado, em parte, pela qualidade de Moçambique como um dos países piloto dos princípios diretores das Nações Unidas sobre negócios e direitos. Em relação à visão geral do processo negocial e participação do grupo africano nas próximas etapas do processo, somos da opinião que o processo das negociações tem decorrido de forma positiva. Desde a primeira sessão, apesar das divergências dos posicionamentos das várias regiões e países, mas principalmente entre o norte
I think we're facing some technical difficulties.
Hello?
Hi, are you back online? Sorry, we lost you for a little bit.
So I don't know. Okay, I will just continue because I think we have a time constraint. So let me just say that eu dizia que, a nosso entender, há evidências dos interesses global em defender e proteger as multinacionais, origem ou sede do grosso das companhias multinacionais, caracterizadas pela complexidade das suas estruturas orgânicas e cadeias globais de valor. Embora as negociações tenham resultado na melhoria da versão prevista do projeto do instrumento em causa, prevalecem lacunas fundamentais, com destaque para a expansão do escopo do projeto que foi dito por um dos painelistas, contrariando o mandato da Resolução 26/9 do Conselho dos Direitos Humanos. Se lembram, caros participantes, encarregou o grupo de trabalho a conceber o projeto de instrumento visando a regulação das atividades das multinacionais. na perspectiva dos direitos humanos, em primeiro. Em relação à participação do grupo africano, achamos que tem sido boa, embora pudesse ser mais dinâmica e incisiva. Hello?
Hi, sir. Thank you for that intervention. We're
I'm not sure if Jaime was finished, but I can
bit of
hear him
technical
well.
difficulties in relation to channel which you were speaking in. But please make sure for all the participants that you just click on the globe and interpretation channel and then choose the respective language that you'd like to hear. Even those that are intervening now on the floor, please make sure that you're not in any interpretation channel, that the interpretation is off, then you can intervene. It just helps us to make sure that there isn't any overlaps in relation to that. So
yeah, sorry,
Ambassador Jamie, would you like to still?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I think Jaime was not finished.
In and finish
Yes.
off?
Can I continue then?
Please.
Thank you. Yeah, we're having difficulties, but I will just continue and skip some passages so that I can, finish this, okay?
Thank you so much.
So, no que se refere à próxima etapa do processo negocial, a nossa expectativa é que as negociações ultrapassem a questão da situação do estupro. Well, then let me try to speak in English at once, although my notes are in Portuguese, but let me try, to speak in English so that we can speed up the process. Is that okay?
Eu acho que pode falar em português, mas tem
thank
que
you so much.
conectar.
Ambassador Jamie, do you please mind clicking on translation to be off so that you're speaking on original audio? Then we'll be able to all hear you.
Is that okay if I put a different language than Portuguese?
Yes, please. Just switch off translation.
So I was saying that in terms of the next phase of the negotiation, our expectation is that we can overcome the issue of the scope as it stands now. And as far as we're concerned, we'll keep on insisting that really the scope, limit itself to the TNCs. We hope also that we will get an understanding and agreement on the need for the different articles in different sessions of the project to emphasize the legal responsibilities of the TNC and not of the states parties. Although we recognize the primary responsibility of the states to respect, uphold, and realize the rights of their people. So as for the content of specific parts of this draft, when it comes to the preamble, we think that the distinction between indigenous peoples are in between the vulnerable groups. It may be problematic in the African context. As for the designation of the TNCs as such, instead of designing them as a business enterprise, we want to see the designation of TNC clearly spelled out in this text. In light of Resolution 26/9. We have reservation on para 20 of the preamble. For there is no need of clarifying the obligation of states in relation to the abuse of human rights. On definitions, Article 1, we think that beyond what has been defined, there should be definition of violation of human rights and what is meant by business enterprise, because this is missing, but over the text we see all this appearing. On Article 2, declaration of the we think that we should not align ourselves with line A of the first paragraph for the reason we did explain before. On Article 3, on the scope, the formulation of para 1 brings the multinationals in the second place. Prioritizing the business enterprise, which is not the way it should be formulated. On the other side, we think that Article 13 on international cooperation has been substantially improved, but we would like to see the issue of prevention of violations and abuse included there, given its importance. On Section 3, Article 15, we have noticed the replica of the formulation that is in the different human rights instruments. And we think that we should embrace such formulation. In the meantime, the draft does not indicate the frequency of the state parties conferences. And we think it should be once a year, like the case of other human rights instruments. So now in Portuguese, because I'm about to finish, nós subscrevemos a necessidade do projeto ter em conta o impacto da Covid. It seems that you are not getting me. So, em tanto que pandemia, na perspectiva de que outras pandemias poderão ocorrer no futuro. E as farmacêuticas grosso das quais é multinacional, jogam um papel de relevo na produção de fármacos. Não esquecendo a problemática dos direitos de propriedade intelectual ligados ao comércio. Aliás, tanto os relatórios da Alta Comissária para os Direitos Humanos, como dos diferentes mecanismos do Conselho de Direitos Humanos, e diferentes mecanismos do Conselho dos Direitos Humanos sugerem que haja evidências empíricas de que os direitos de propriedade intelectual ligados ao comércio na área de fármacos estejam a privar franjas significativas do direito à saúde. E obrigado pela atenção. Estamos juntos.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Jamie, for your intervention. Apologies, comrades, for the lag. I think one of the challenges is, of course, the connectivity issues, and also because we're using a virtual platform. So thank you so much for your patience. And again, apologies for any technical difficulties. I think moving forward, if anyone would like to intervene, please raise your hands. We are moving towards almost wrapping up the session, so please take note to make your interventions as succinct as possible. And just a reminder in relation to translation and interpretation, when you are intervening, please, if, for example, if I was a French speaker and I'm going to intervene in French, I remain into the French channel and I make sure that I mute original audio. In that way, then I won't hear the audio coming through, but I'll be able to hear the translation. So I can see that there is one more hand up for intervention from the floor. So I'm going to give Abbas an opportunity to please come in. Abbas, please feel free to intervene. You just need to unmute yourself. Hi, Abbas, if you are intervening, we can't hear you. Okay, I think we might be facing slight challenges with Abbas connecting. Please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to intervene right now.
Hello?
Hi, Abbas, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Hello, Erika. And how are you, all of you? And all the attenders. I am Mr. Abbas Yunus Atim from Sudan, Khartoum, and a lawyer and LLM student at UNISA. So today here in the net is very weak, so I made my comment on chat here. So you are doing great job today, and my last point is that READY should be take into consideration the local tradition, customs, and norms, because Africa, Africa is the same tradition. Only everywhere you go, that people is believe their own tradition and things better than international instruments, So business activities must be take according to the norms of traditions. This is very important point. This can give effect to human rights and also to business activities. So if you looking our ground people very poor in education, in business, in everything. So now we going to look what is wrong here. So it is important we must be close with the local people, because business, effective business must be in local place, such as agriculture, animals, and mineral, natural mineral, and something like this. So the focus must be we look in the right of the indigenous people and their customers and their thoughts and their everyday behavior. So this can help all of us to respect their own rights. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abbas, for your intervention. And we've been seeing also on the chat that you've made several interventions, which are highly appreciated. Does anyone would like to intervene or share some thoughts and input? I see Macau would like to intervene. So Macau, I'm just gonna let you come in, and then after Macau, we're going to see if we could just read some of the questions that are in the question and answer tab. Macau, you could just unmute yourself. Please feel free to take the floor.
Okay, thank you. I was looking for that, in fact. So I am Macau. I'm from the Africa-Europe Faith Justice Network, Kenya antenna. From the draft document, apart from the inputs that you put, especially on what is missing, I was wondering, is there any alternative that could be part of the document to say, as we have the experience, as the governments go with the agreement with these TNCs, and normally, as some of the speakers have alluded, some go direct to the government or the government to this company, and so they are not bound by any of these treaty, as we were thinking. What would be the alternative? What can a group like this we are have as an alternative view? Should the government not abide to this? This could be, because we know if it's the UN level, those are the consequences, and again, it will depend on government to government, government to the body of UN. But now the groups that are the civil society, do they have another voice that can become the alternative? Should the government not accept? Should the company, the TNCs, don't abide and they directly wanted to connect with the government, which we know there will be definitely compromise of the state itself, given the African situation that we know, corruption has become almost a part of it. What can be any other voice, an alternative at the end of this agreement, that if this and this doesn't happen, there's still an open way that the government can be compelled, the companies can be compelled to do something. Thank you. That's my view.
Thank you so much, Macau, for your intervention. I'm going to, at some moment, give an opportunity to the panelists to sort of intervene and share some of their final thoughts, and also probably questions to fall into this discussion. So I think I'm just going to give them an opportunity to Father Joe to come in and share sort of his final thoughts and questions. And I'm also going to open it up for the other panelists too. So Father Joe first, and then Comrade Mish. Father Joe, please feel free to take the floor.
Yeah. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Father Joe.
Yeah, I would like a clarification with regard to the scope. I want this in order to clarify the lantern of the bishops. With regard to the scope, yesterday it was, they alluded to it, they spoke about it. The fact that it's enlarged, I was thinking that it means that other things have been put in. So it makes the whole thing bigger than limited to TNT or transnational TNC. So what is the best way, the way out? Is it when it's limited, or is it when the scope is enlarged? That's my question.
Thank you so much, Father Joe. I'm very mindful of the fact that I've been speaking a lot, and comrades are probably very tired of hearing my voice. So I'm going to make sure that I give other comrades an opportunity to intervene. But I think probably after Comrade Meshach, maybe Comrade Erica can come in and tackle some questions and points, and also talk directly to the question asked by Father Joe. Comrade Meshach, you can come in.
Thank you, Comrade Kia. Yeah, I think again, looking at the Article 6, I'm very much concerned that there should be included the issues of communities deciding or to determine what development they want to see, regarding from the TNCs. And again, my concern is that communities have lost a lot of benefits out of these TNCs, because, for instance, in South Africa, we have social and labor plans, which started early, maybe 2004 or earlier then. And when we did our work auditing these social and labor plans to readdress the historical disadvantaged people, 99% of all these multinational companies, transnational companies, did not comply. And we're talking of a lot of issues like they're supposed to, for instance, build a water reservoir in that community. And in the paper is there, but in reality it's not there. So I'm saying 6.1 and article number 6 should give the communities the right to be part of engaging in looking at what is needed to be done. Not only the TNCs, because they are the ones who are doing the wrong things, and we need our own communities to be part of that. And again, stressing the articles of 20, 21, and 24, that is the key issues, the instruments, the legal issues. The government should be definitely engaged in using that so that we can hold these companies accountable. And if that's not happening, nothing will really happen. The last thing, I still emphasize the issue of we should, through free, prior, informed consent, be able to dismantle the corporation power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Mish, for re-emphasizing the importance of making sure that affected people and communities are at the center of decision-making processes. And basically, in essence, saying that if communities have the right to say no, we're then able to actually curb the power of transnational corporations. So I'm just going to let then Comrade Erica come in and give share any thoughts and answer some of the questions put to the floor. Erica, please feel free to come in.
Obrigada, Kia. Obrigada pela intervenção também do Dr. Jaime, que foi bastante útil, e obrigada a todas as perguntas dos participantes e comentários. Eu vou começar por ler uma pergunta que foi colocada aqui no chat em português, também para que todos possam ouvir a tradução. É uma pergunta da doutora Terezinha da Silva, que diz que gostaria que fosse tratado também outra abordagem a este tema, a necessidade de uma lei de reassentamentos e o papel dos governos para garantir o cumprimento das leis às corporações transnacionais. Eu acho que já, em parte, isto já foi respondido quando falamos da questão da centralidade dos direitos das pessoas afetadas, que devem justamente estar no centro do processo de negociação e elaboração deste tratado e, posteriormente, da sua implementação. Isto é relevante quando falamos também do que o companheiro Meshach estava a falar sobre o consentimento livre, prévio e informado, sobre as consultas, que é um conceito que vai além do conceito de consulta, porque é fundamental que as pessoas afetadas tenham voz e possam, obviamente, negociar as condições para que certos investimentos sejam implementados e até mesmo resistirem e oporem-se a investimentos que considerem que seriam danosos para os seus meios de subsistência, para a sua terra, para o meio ambiente, etc. Acho que garantindo os direitos das pessoas afetadas e garantindo que são centrais em todas as questões de elaboração do tratado é bastante importante, até mesmo em questões de prevenção de futuras violações de direitos humanos. A questão dos reassentamentos é algo que temos acompanhado por todo o continente. Em Moçambique temos vários exemplos de violações de direitos humanos que têm ocorrido nos processos de reassentamento. Temos reassentamentos que foram feitos de forma muito precária por várias corporações, principalmente na área extrativa. Temos inclusive comunidades afetadas que viveram durante anos dentro da área de concessão mineira, como é o caso da concessão mineira da Jindal, e que apenas após batalhas legais de vários anos é que conseguiram ter o seu direito reconhecido para que sejam reassentadas, e depois os próprios problemas que advêm com esse reassentamento. Então, é importante que isto seja dada atenção a isto, e quando pensamos também na forma como os nossos Estados vão garantir os direitos destas pessoas afetadas, é importante também entendermos as estruturas geopolíticas que estão por detrás também desta impunidade das corporações. Sabemos que muitas vezes as elites globais, do capital global, estão em conivência com as nossas elites domésticas, nacionais, e é justamente por isso que precisamos também que o tratado, para ser efetivo, garanta que as pessoas afetadas tenham acesso, por exemplo, a tribunais onde, por exemplo, a empresa matriz esteja hospedada. Muitas vezes são jurisdições em países do norte global que, por não haver ainda obrigações internacionais para as corporações a nível do direito internacional, isto é impossível neste momento. Então, uma das coisas que pretendemos que aconteça com este tratado e que temos exigido é a possibilidade de tribunais de outros países que tenham uma ligação ou com a empresa matriz ou com a própria pessoa afetada, ou que tenham, por exemplo, alguma subsidiária que faça parte dessa cadeia global de valor, que possam, portanto, ouvir casos de violações, garantindo assim que o obstáculo de acesso à justiça a nível da jurisdição nacional possa ser ultrapassado. Eu queria também reforçar a questão da importância de haver estes espaços de diálogo a nível da sociedade civil e dos governos, e que este processo, muitas vezes, ou os processos a nível das Nações Unidas, muitas vezes, e o que temos ouvido também de muitos representantes de Estados africanos, é que as missões a nível de Genebra são pequenas e não têm capacidade para seguir todos os detalhes de todos os processos que estão em negociação. Então, obviamente que uma negociação de um tratado requer o envolvimento não só das embaixadas em Genebra, mas também a nível da capital. Então, é fundamental que as embaixadas em Genebra estejam em contacto com os seus ministérios a nível da capital e que, por sua vez, estejam em contacto com a sociedade civil e as pessoas afetadas. Existem inúmeras organizações, advogados, académicos, especialistas que estão a trabalhar nesta questão e possibilitando esta troca de informação e esta troca de conhecimentos, já há inúmeras análises legais, propostas concretas para melhorar o texto, portanto, propostas mesmo textuais de como alterar algumas das provisões que estão no tratado e de quais outras devem ser incluídas. Portanto, acho que este diálogo entre a sociedade civil, comunidades afetadas e os seus representantes é fundamental também mesmo para aumentar a capacidade que os nossos representantes poderão ter neste processo de negociações. Eu não sei se tenho mais alguma pergunta específica, mas acho que posso terminar por aqui e acho que os meus colegas também poderão complementar. Obrigada, Kia.
Thank you so much, Erica, for that. There's also some commentary happening on the chat, but please feel free to also raise your hands and, or rather in particular, say if you'd like to intervene. This is for the panelists, so just that we can head towards sort of summing up and closing the session. So are any of the panelists prepared and ready to sort of give some final remarks?
Yes, maybe. Here.
Okay, so while the panelists are being a little bit shy, I'm going to give an opportunity to someone on the floor to please come in. So Bonnie Sheriff has her hand up. I'm just going to allow Bonnie to come in and share. Bonnie, please feel free to unmute and share.
Bonsoir tout le monde, c'est Bonnie de Madagascar, présidente de l'ONG Odima et country représentative de l'Expropriation Madagascar. Je pense qu'il faut avoir une indépendance économique pour pouvoir rendre ces contraintes effectives. Dans la plupart des pays africains, les élections présidentielles sont financées par les sociétés transnationales et les présidents, une fois élus, leur sont redevables. Et ce qui empêche toute forme de négociation en matière du respect des droits humains. Et dans ce cas, quelles mesures prendre dans ce cas? Parce que ça fait longtemps que nous luttons contre la corruption, mais ces luttes ne donnent toujours pas les résultats escomptés. Ceux qui ont de l'argent, au fait, n'ont pas de pouvoir, et ceux qui sont en possession de pouvoir n'ont pas de l'argent. Et ça devient une rencontre entre les corrupteurs. Voilà.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, for sharing your concern and thoughts. I'm going to give an opportunity to Benjamin to please take the floor and intervene.
Thank you very much, Kia. Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais juste...
Comrade Ben, if you intervene, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais juste dire quelques mots de conclusion de mon côté. Je pense qu'il est très important que nous ayons ce type de discussion parce que ça permet effectivement de mettre ce sujet au cœur des discussions et et de l'intérêt finalement de nos organisations de la société civile, mais aussi tout simplement de placer cette question dans le débat public, ce qui manque crucialement dans la plupart de nos États africains. Je pense que c'est un peu la raison pour laquelle, en tout cas, la coalition africaine pour la redevabilité des entreprises, qui est une coalition d'entreprises de la société civile, d'organisations, pardon, de la société civile africaine, s'est engagée dans cette activité, aussi bien celle d'hier que celle d'aujourd'hui. Je pense qu'au regard de la richesse des discussions que nous avons eues et aussi des questions qui se posent, on peut avoir un certain espoir quant à la vulgarisation, la dissémination de ces débats dans l'espace public. Je voudrais tout simplement, en concluant cette activité ce soir, dire en réalité que tous les problèmes qui se posent au sujet de la responsabilité ou de la redevabilité des entreprises multinationales ou des entreprises en général, c'est selon, ne peuvent pas être réglés, il faut bien qu'on ait conscience, ne peuvent pas juste être réglés dans un instrument, quelle que soit sa richesse ou quels que soient ses détails. N'est-ce pas? Le traité, à notre avis, en tout cas à mon avis, est un moyen pour renforcer les discussions autour de cette question. Je pense que qui a la relevé au début de cet après-midi, en début d'après-midi, il y a en réalité des raisons structurelles à ce qui nous arrive en Afrique quand on regarde le comportement des entreprises multinationales chez nous. Il y a des raisons historiques à ça, il y a des inégalités structurelles, il y a des inégalités historiques, il y a un gros problème qui va au-delà, n'est-ce pas, d'une simple question juridique. Donc, il est important en fait que cet aspect, cette dimension de la question soit connue et qu'on en prenne conscience. À mon avis, effectivement, je pense que pour revenir à la question et au commentaire qui a été fait tout à l'heure par notre ami de Madagascar, je pense que c'est là le problème. Il ne faut pas forcément considérer que c'est un traité qui va venir régler tous les problèmes. D'ailleurs, nous sommes encore très loin de l'adoption de ce traité. Vous avez vu tous les débats qui se posent, même l'intervenant étatique qui était avec nous aujourd'hui a mentionné le fait que son État n'était pas totalement d'accord avec la question du champ d'application du traité. On sait qu'il y a plusieurs États, notamment occidentaux, dont les entreprises actuellement opèrent sur le continent, qui ne sont pas partis dans le processus, et on sait qu'il y a des difficultés. Donc, il n'est pas sûr que le traité lui-même soit adopté maintenant ou dans un futur proche. Mais ce qui nous importe, c'est de maintenir en fait la pression pour qu'un tel instrument puisse un jour être adopté, mais aussi surtout pour que le débat puisse être maintenu dans l'espace public et que les comportements puissent changer dans la bonne direction. Le rôle de la société civile, effectivement, c'est de pousser nos États à engager cette discussion avec les autres au niveau international pour qu'on puisse évoluer. Je pense que Monsieur Labbé avait posé une question. Je sais que Erika a plus ou moins répondu à la question. Je voudrais juste rajouter que la question du champ d'application du traité a toujours été une question qui a divisé dès le début des négociations. En réalité, l'idée de s'engager dans ce processus a commencé avec une vision assez restreinte du champ d'application, c'est-à-dire ce sont les entreprises multinationales qui étaient visées parce qu'effectivement, on estime que c'est elles qui posent le plus de problèmes, dans la mesure où les entreprises ordinaires au sein des États sont soumises ou sont censées être soumises aux législations internes des États. On se dit que ce ne sont pas elles qui posent le plus de problèmes. Mais aujourd'hui, la question du champ d'application se pose parce que même au sein des États africains, il y a une sorte de rupture de consensus parce que certaines entreprises, petites entreprises ou moyennes entreprises, considèrent que ce traité, peut-être à raison ou à tort, que ce traité pourrait éventuellement ajouter trop d'obligations aux obligations qu'ils ont déjà. Ce qui fait que certains gouvernements, sous la pression d'entreprises nationales, aujourd'hui, même en Afrique, hésitent à s'engager dans ce processus. alors qu'effectivement, dès le départ, il ne faut pas le perdre de vue. La raison fondamentale pour laquelle on s'est engagé dans ce processus, c'était pour s'attaquer à la question des multinationales, parce que justement, il y a un vide juridique en ce qui concerne leur intervention. Et donc, il me semble que c'est ce qui constitue la pomme de discorde et c'est ce qui fait qu'aujourd'hui, la question du champ d'application pose problème. Ce qu'il faudrait faire, à notre avis, vu que vous posiez la question, c'est de rester attaché à la résolution 26-9 de 2014 qui a donné le mandat au groupe de travail intergouvernemental pour préparer un traité. Et ce mandat visait précisément les entreprises transnationales, les entreprises multinationales. Il est important que nous restions dans cette logique et voilà, il est important, comme je l'ai dit, que nous réalisions que c'est quelque chose dans lequel nos États sont engagés, mais dont l'issue n'est pas encore certaine. De notre côté, nous allons continuer à mettre la pression pour que nous arrivions à faire en sorte que les entreprises qui interviennent dans nos pays puissent respecter le minimum de dignité humaine. Alors, je pense que ce qui relève, n'est-ce pas, ce qui est prévu par les instruments internationaux des droits de l'homme. Je pense que je vais m'arrêter là. Je remercie évidemment tout le monde pour cette discussion riche et j'espère que les négociations la semaine prochaine porteront un bel espoir pour que dans un futur proche, nous ayons cet instrument juridiquement contraignant. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Ben. I see there's one more hand, and again, there's a few comments and things taking place on the chat, so please feel free to look at it. I think there's like important points coming in relation to the language, in relation to the text, some comments coming from comrades in relation to how we can really look at shaping and reforming some of the articles, and most importantly, comments and thoughts in relation to the important parts that the treaty should cover and really tackle and look at. So I'm going to allow one more hand from the floor, and then we can then head to wrap up the session, comrades. So can Chairman please unmute themselves and intervene? Chairman, can you please intervene? You just need to unmute yourselves. And can everyone hear me? All right, so just for the sake of time, I think we're going to just move ahead. I think there's maybe technical difficulties that Chairman is facing. So please feel free to post onto the chat. And also please remember that the conversation doesn't end here, nor does it start in this particular point. I think it's important for us to remember that we're meeting here and being in conversation with one another so that we can be able to draft and put together a large commentary that is going to contribute to civil society's inputs and interventions in Geneva and during the discussion also during the 6th session that's taking place next week. I think it was important for us to convene this and for us to be able to share with one another our perspectives and ideas and thoughts in relation to this, to not only amplify our voices, but to get some clarification in relation to particular points and things that we might not be able to understand or may not be able to sort of share the same thoughts. I want to take this opportunity to firstly thank all the participants or attendees, if you like, for joining this session and being with us for the duration of the time. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, perspectives, and ideas and interventions. I'd like to also take a moment to really thank the panelists for coming in and intervening in particular points that sort of give light to the importance of the treaty from an African perspective. I think we should continue to see how we can keep this conversation going, and please please be sure and make sure to look out for correspondence from us as you've shared your email addresses with us. We will be sharing information and content and any other things that come up from this coalition itself. I wanted to emphasize particular things that have come out from this conversation, and of course many other conversations that we've been a part of, which is the point around, of course, affected communities, of course, women's issues, of course, the point in relation to labor, trade, investment agreements, the challenges and issues that international financial institutions bring to the fore, issues in relation to access of remedies and access to information, which has become particularly important and clear to be one of the important issues that need to be tackled by the treaty. We're saying that we don't need just access to information for the sake of access to information, but we're saying that we need access to information right from the beginning of any other project or any form of penetration into our African economies and markets. Another important thing I think that has come out from this, which we are emphasizing, is that challenging globalization and challenging the implementation of neoliberalism today should also be a call of international solidarity. So we're not saying that we should de-link ourselves, but we're saying that we should de-globalize and sort of make sure that we are no longer opening ourselves up to corporate impunity as a whole. And the treaty is one of the ways in which can assist us to do that. One of the other important things that we're talking about is that, which really came out strongly in this session, is matters around the scope. It is very, very, very important for comrades to remember, and I think we've said it in different shapes and forms, that we need the scope to be for T&Cs. We cannot afford, and we don't need the treaty to tackle any other business, because that would mean that if some of us are entrepreneurs and taking part in small business activities, we would then be penalized for unnecessary things. But when we're focusing, and the scope focuses on transnational corporations or multinational corporations, if you like, it will then be able to tackle the human rights violations that are happening in the large scale and dismantle the power of corporations. We've spoken about, in essence, a system or a development paradigm that exists. And if we focus the scope of the treaty on transnational corporations, this is a means to roll back the power of the system itself and an opportunity for us to reclaim our sovereignty as people. That being said, I'd like again to thank you, comrades, for joining us for this session. Please look out for the recording that will be shared with you, and probably a full document with some of our ideas and thoughts that came out of this. I'd like to thank all the panelists and thank also the participants and all the organizers of yesterday's workshop and today's session. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good evening, good day, good morning. Thanks, comrades. Goodbye.